On January 3, 2026, the world awoke to a headline that electrified millions. Nicolas Maduro was no longer in power. The news didn't just ripple through Venezuela. It surged across continents, igniting hope in places where it had long been extinguished. For many, it felt like the impossible had finally happened, a moment that would be remembered for generations. After years of suffering, uncertainty, and exile, Venezuelans everywhere felt a weight lift from their shoulders. The pain of separation, the ache of longing for home, and the daily struggle to survive under repression suddenly gave way to a flood of relief and disbelief. The news spread instantly. Phones rang, social media exploded, and families separated by oceans wept together on video calls. Screens became windows into a shared joy. As laughter and tears mingled in living rooms from Caracas to Toronto, from Bogota to Berlin. In cities across the globe, people poured into the streets, united by a single, overwhelming emotion: freedom. Strangers embraced. Old friends found each other in the crowds. And the air was thick with the sound of singing, chanting, and celebration. From Miami to Madrid, a collective cry of joy echoed, a moment of liberation after years of darkness. The world watched as Venezuelan flags waved high, and voices that had been silenced for so long finally rang out in unison. For the diaspora, this was more than politics. It was the end of a long exile and the rebirth of hope. It was the promise of return, of reunions long dreamed of, and of families finally able to imagine a future together in their homeland. The burden of explaining Venezuela's collapse to strangers, of holding on to fragile hope, was suddenly replaced by a roaring fire of possibility. The world's eyes were on Venezuela, but for Venezuelans, it was a moment to reclaim their story, their pride, and their dreams. January 3rd became a day of deliverance, marking the end of hunger, repression, and mass exodus. It was a day when the word libertad was not just a slogan, but a lived reality, echoing through streets and homes alike. It was the start of a new story, one of homecoming, reunion, and healing. Airports filled with joyful reunions, and city squares became places of welcome as those who had left began to dream of returning. The celebrations weren't just about a dictator's fall, they were about reclaiming a nation's spirit. Music, art, and laughter returned to public spaces as people rediscovered the simple joys of community and belonging. Across continents, Venezuelans rediscovered the power of unity and resilience. The world saw a people who, despite everything, had never truly given up on each other or on their country. The dream of a free Venezuela was alive again, brighter, stronger, and more determined than ever before. In South Florida, the heart of the Venezuelan diaspora, celebration erupted instantly. Doral and Weston, nicknamed Doralzuela and Westonzuela, became the epicenter of joy. By dawn, thousands gathered outside El Arepazo, the community's cultural hub, dancing salsa and waving flags. Chants of libertad filled the air as banners of opposition leader Maria Corina Machado soared above the crowd. Ana Gonzalez, her voice trembling, declared, "Today, the dreams of Venezuelans abroad came true." For many, this was the culmination of decades of waiting and struggle. The streets overflowed with gratitude, relief, and the promise of a new era. In Santiago, Chile, plazas became seas of Venezuelan flags as thousands celebrated. For migrants who had endured years of hardship, the news brought tears and hope. Yurimar Rojas, a street vendor, exclaimed, "At last we'll be able to go back home." The dream of return, once distant, now felt real. Amid recent political tensions in Chile, the fall of Maduro offered a new kind of hope. The chance to return, not just to survive abroad. The celebration was a declaration. Soon, they would be citizens rebuilding their own nation. For the first time in years, the future felt within reach. In Madrid, Spain, the Venezuelan community flooded Puerta del Sol in jubilation. Flags waved, faces were painted, and chants of Se fue, rang out. Years of frustration and longing melted into hugs and tears among strangers. The fall of Maduro validated their hope and reconnected them with the idea of a free Venezuela. The celebration in Madrid mirrored those in Miami and Santiago, a global testament to the diaspora's unity. No matter the distance, their hearts remained rooted in Venezuela. On this day, the spirit of Venezuela was alive in every corner of the world. Liberation was no longer a dream. It was reality. The joy of this day was born from years of profound loss and trauma. For many Venezuelans, the celebrations are bittersweet, echoing memories of a homeland they were forced to leave behind. The streets now filled with laughter once echoed with uncertainty and fear. Nearly 8 million Venezuelans fled, not by choice, but by necessity. They left behind homes, careers, and the comfort of familiar neighborhoods, driven by a desperate need to survive. Each journey was marked by uncertainty, exhaustion, and the hope for a safer future. Once doctors, engineers, and artists, they watched their lives unravel as hyperinflation and hunger gripped the nation. Talented professionals found themselves unable to buy food or medicine, their skills rendered powerless by a collapsing economy. Shelves emptied, medicine vanished, and families were torn apart. Parents skipped meals so their children could eat, and neighbors shared what little they had. The daily struggle for basic necessities became a test of endurance and hope. Political repression silenced dissent. Staying meant risking prison or worse. Speaking out could cost you your freedom, or even your life. Many lived in fear, watching friends and family disappear for daring to demand change. David Núñez, who escaped persecution, was one of thousands forced to flee for safety. His story is echoed by countless others who left everything behind, seeking refuge in unfamiliar lands, hoping to one day return. The exodus created a generation of separated families, parents leaving children, young people leaving aging parents. Every departure was a heartbreak, every goodbye a promise to reunite, no matter how long it took. Ariani Garcia, celebrating in Florida, voiced the pain of 5 years apart from her family. Her joy was mixed with longing, her laughter tinged with memories of home and loved ones left behind. The diaspora's wound was constant, longing for loved ones left behind. Across continents, families clung to hope through phone calls and photos, holding on to the dream of reunion. The fall of Maduro was inseparable from the hope of healing and reunion. For many, it signaled the possibility of returning home, of rebuilding lives, and reconnecting with those they love. This was not just a political victory. It was a chance to mend broken lives, to restore families, and to begin writing a new chapter of hope for Venezuela's future. Amid the jubilant celebrations filling the streets, it was the personal stories that revealed the true meaning of freedom, stories woven from longing, hope, and the dream of finally going home after years of waiting. Nora Villamarin, who had spent 25 long years in exile, was finally ready to return to the land of her childhood. She dreamed of showing her children the country she once called home, introducing them to their roots, their culture, and the family they had only known through stories and photographs. For years, families like Nora's survived on pixelated video calls and distant voices echoing through speakers. Birthdays, graduations, and holidays were shared through screens, with laughter and tears, separated by thousands of miles. David Núñez, separated from his daughters for nearly a decade, longed for the day he could finally hold them close again, to make up for lost time and missed milestones. Ariani Garcia, too, carried the hope of reunion in her heart, dreaming of the moment she could embrace her loved ones after years apart and rebuild the bonds that distance had strained but never broken. Miguel Reynoso imagined the joy of introducing his children to Venezuela for the very first time, not just through stories or faded photographs, but in person, walking together through the vibrant streets of Caracas and sharing the sights, sounds, and flavors of his homeland. Across continents, plans to return began to take shape. Families packed suitcases, checked travel documents, and dared to believe that the impossible was now within reach. The ouster of Maduro unlocked a future that had once seemed sealed shut. For many, liberty now meant more than just political change. It meant the promise of homecoming, of reunions, and of healing old wounds. The diaspora's greatest hope was no longer a distant dream. It was a real possibility, a future that families could finally plan for, and a chance to reconnect with the land and people they loved. The journey home, once only imagined, was finally possible. For millions, the long-awaited return was no longer just a hope. It was about to become reality. Amid the euphoria, a cautious optimism emerged. Venezuelans knew that removing Maduro was only the first step. The real challenge was rebuilding justice, trust, and the rule of law. Niurka Melendez in New York reminded all, "The real work begins now." Gustavo Gilmont echoed, "This will take time." The joy of the day was fuel for the long road ahead. The diaspora's maturity showed. They celebrated, but understood the scale of the task. Their hope was determined, not naive. As celebrations faded, attention turned to Venezuela's daunting recovery. The nation's infrastructure, economy, and social fabric were in ruins. Community leaders called for temporary protected status in the U.S. to support those who couldn't yet return. Humanitarian aid was urgently needed: food, medicine, and stability. The diaspora, with its expertise and networks, would play a crucial role in rebuilding. The U.S. announced temporary oversight and oil sales to fund recovery, sparking hope and debate. Most agreed stability was the immediate priority. The goal? Free elections and the restoration of Venezuelan democracy. As the day ended, a new promise took hold: return, reunion, and rebuilding. The diaspora, once a symbol of loss, became the engine of recovery. Dreams ranged from reopening businesses to reuniting families and restoring hospitals and schools. The journey home would be one of healing and reconnection. Forgiveness and collaboration would be essential to mend political divisions. For the first time in years, a united Venezuela felt possible. January 3, 2026, revealed the unbreakable spirit of its people. From Miami to Madrid, the message was clear. Venezuela was not lost. Its heart beat in millions across the globe, ready to return and rebuild. The promise to return was a promise to heal,